Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Grandmothers panel. I'm sure maybe a lot of you don't really know what this is about. A lot of people are asking me, like, oh, wait, are these women grandmothers? Like, what is this about? And it's really interesting. Christy called me to do this because I've actually, I go around doing a lot of conferences and events like this, and a few that I've done in California recently, I had to do these events with these Native American elders that were brought in. And every time I've done them recently, so grandmother in the Native American is a Native American term for like wise women, and grandmothers in the Native American culture, it was they were like considered like the wisest kind of people in their tribes. In a lot of the tribes, I don't know if it was all the tribes, but a lot of the tribes, it was usually a council of grandmothers that would come together to really decide everything. Like the men would decide like, oh, maybe we should go to this war or do this, but it really came down to the grandmothers were the ones that had to finally, make the final decisions on what they were going to do as a tribe. So the grandmothers were really considered the wise women, and they were really respected in their culture, and as all grandmothers should be, right? And so it's interesting because in a lot of events I've been to in California lately with these Native American elders, they've come up to me and said, "Wow, grandmother," when they introduced me, and they're like, and then one of them told me, he was like, this is, it's interesting because we can tell a lot of us are trained to see as, shamans and Native American elders, we're trained to see when there is a grandmother that comes out, whether, she doesn't have to be Native American, but of any tradition. I was actually, I have my great grandma was from a Cherokee Indian reservation, and my uncle did a lot of shamanic stuff growing up, so. Yeah, it's definitely something I feel connected with, and all these women here, Chrissy told me to just kind of bring on anyone that I felt worked right with this, and all these women behind me here I really feel are tapped into that Native American grandmother's vibe. I really feel that with these women here, so I asked them all to come on, and I'm really excited about this. So I'm interested to know, I guess we'll just go pass it around to start out with. I feel like I should be facing you guys. But maybe just say what each of you think the grandmother term, the wise woman, means to you.
Well, wise women, it's interesting because I spent most of my life as an adult working as a director of a women's organization for the state of Georgia. So we had an award called the Wise Woman Award. And it's really about women embody empathy and compassion and hold knowledge. And you think about it, women's bodies are a portal to bring life into this world. And it's really just about the nurturing aspect of being a woman. There's women are so important. I think that the age that we're coming into right now in this awakening, women are really rising up. And I think the power of the feminine energy is just so important. And it's all about nurturing and compassion and love. I'm not an actual grandmother, but I am a mother. And it's just the things that women, grandmothers pass down to their grandmothers and mothers, pass down to their grandchildren and grandchildren. I mean, that's just love. It's love, it's knowledge, and it's wisdom. And we're here to make our children wise, and so that's what I think.
It's interesting when you say passing on before she goes, oh, I'm sorry, you can pass on the mic, but I think it's interesting because I've heard that actually the lineage, when it comes to like DNA and the way the lineage or the DNA is passed down, is actually through women. That's like the main, I don't know exactly how to explain it scientifically, but it's interesting because our today's society, when we get married, we have to take on the male's last name, or like when there's an heir, like to a king or a queen, it's usually, the boy, but it actually kind of makes more sense if it's the female because that's where the main, like both chromosomes pass down through. So it's kind of interesting.
That's interesting. And also, in my family, we have, there's like abilities that are passed down through the women in the family, like the gift of sight and, like just being extremely like switched on as, I guess you could say, psychic in a way, that things like that run in our family. And it's a lot of times it's on the female the females pass that down. And so that's something that's kind of prevalent in my family. Okay.
Awesome.
I never expected to be on a grandmother's panel so early, but I am a grandmother of 3 beautiful, amazing Starseed grandchildren, Ryan, Reagan, and Riley. And I do work with the indigenous shamanic grandmothers. And, I think grandmother is about the matriarchal energy. I know when my grandmother transitioned, who my grandparents raised me, it's like the whole home and the whole entire family quit gathering and they quit coming together because the grandmothers, and I say grandmothers because it's about resonance to me, they hold this frequency of really keeping the container together, the family together, and bringing in that alchemy of food and wisdom and that connection with our ancestry and everything. So I'm looking at things like, honestly, I had to come to terms about I freaked out when I became a grandmother before 40. How does that happen? But, I feel like we're stepping into a new paradigm of grandmothers, and this is a whole new chapter. As a techno grandmother, as a grandmother of the electronic music generation, it's like a whole new wavelength. But my heart is to instill the values of the ancestral grandmothers and the wisdom in, and also mesh it in, if you will, and remix that and bring that into where we are in this phase in the game. And so, and really honor the wisdom of the grandmothers, the medicine bundle, the wise women's ways. And, I feel like I'm walking that path right now, but it's just so present in my field because, I freak out. I'm like, how did this become, how did it happen so fast, Never thought it would happen so fast. But, I just see how much the beauty and installation of keeping, this vibrational resonance with your family and with the community and holding that knowledge and passing that bundle on.
I'm also a real life grandmother. So my 2 grandsons are 4 and almost 8, and my step granddaughter's 13. And for me, I think one of the biggest things about the shift from being a mother to being a grandmother is it's a lot easier to be in observer mode. It's a lot easier to sit back and look at things. When you're a mom, you're in the middle of it all the time. Like you're always in the middle of it. But as a grandmother, you can sit back and observe more, not just your grandchildren, but life. It's just easier to be in this more reflective space. And I think that's where a lot of the wisdom comes from. Because when you're in it, you don't have that time to reflect, But when you're like in your older years, you can kind of pull back a little and observe more and kind of drink things in and maybe be more reflective, not rush in as much, take time to digest things more and to assimilate them. So I think that's a big.
Hi. The first thing that came to my mind was I'm not a grandmother just yet, maybe one day, but I liked how you said about the tribal and the shamanic. The first thing that came to me was when a woman goes through a transition from mother to crone. I know that genetically our body is releasing different endorphins in our head, which gives us more higher insight. So I think during that time, women change to gain a deeper wisdom. And because we are creators, and at one point in time through history, we were considered the wise women. I think that's like the next initiation for women. When we go through that transition of life, we gain a deeper wisdom of how we can help the community and our families.
It's really beautiful. It's something that's come up a lot in conversation for me the last couple days, in different talks and in my own talk, is this transition we're going through energetically right now, going from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. Obviously, we're rising now into the divine feminine energy, and that's not saying that there's anything wrong with the divine masculine energy. And we went through the patriarchal society. Now and that was that time. That was right for that time. Before that, it was a matriarchal society, and the patriarchal society was more about structure and building and raising civilization. And now it's time to go back to that community-centered society. And I really feel that right now we're transitioning into that, and that's why we have so much happening with the breakdown of society, because there's all these old structures that are meant for this patriarchal energy, and it's not going to work for this matriarchal, energy we're moving into. The age of Aquarius, that's what this is. It's the rise of the divine feminine, and you can see it rising up, in everywhere and in everyone. The divine feminine is your own personal connection with the divine. Patriarchy is more of like there's a liaison kind of between you and the divine. So I think it's really fascinating that, it seems like this is coming up, everyone can see it, and it's like this river of light that can't be stopped, but at the same time, it's like, the powers that be, they see this and they try so hard to block it out. They want to keep us all separated. They want to separate us from our communities. They want to lock us inside because they're trying to stop that energy, or they see that energy and they try to, almost like defile it through media and Hollywood and try to force down our throats like their representation of that energy. So I just want to ask all of you what the divine feminine means to you. Like, how do you look at the energy of the divine feminine, and how do you see us moving into this energy in this age? And I guess like the societal structures, like what do you see with all that?
Well, you're asking that question to a woman who has a lot of experience with women and women's issues and whatnot. And, as women, we go with the flow, okay? Like, we've had a very, rigid history here, within the age of Pisces and whatnot. And it's been a very, it's driven by, hard work and, on the grind. And, what we're shifting into is a more flowing energy, with the Aquarius. The divine feminine, I've just become familiar with the whole concept of divine feminine over the past few years, with, an awakening of sorts and whatnot. A lot of the women that I am surrounded by this weekend are the embodiment of the divine feminine. I think that it's very powerful. Now, as I used to always say, when I worked for a women's organization, I would always get the comment that, you must hate men, because you work for a women's organization. And no, actually, I would say, no, I love men. And, but, there needs to be a balance. It needs to be more balanced. Really, if anything, we need a balance of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. It's very important. Men are very important in this world. And I know that a lot of people preach like girl power, and that's wonderful. Yes, we have so much power. But, there is a yin to the yang, and, there is that male aspect to that. But a divine feminine is, it's being willing to receive, okay? And that's something that's very hard for women who are known to be givers. It's kind of difficult to go into that role sometimes to be able to receive, and that's a very feminine thing to do. So I think that's something that, we need to focus on a little bit. Not that we have to focus on it, but it's just something to be aware of, is being able to receive more.
Thank you.
I feel that energy too, definitely. I was guided to start the Tri-State Women's Red Tent, which is North Carolina, upstate South Carolina, and North Georgia. So the reason for doing that is because there wasn't a lot of representation in this neck of the woods, so to speak. In Asheville, yes, there is. But I wanted to bring women together, mother, maiden, and crone, and share the heart of what weaves women together. And that happened through a sacred medicine drum that honors Grandmother Twyla Neach of the Seneca Wolf Clan. And what I have found When I think of divine feminine, you usually have this archetypal, beautiful, like Kuan Yin, Mother Mary. You have these archetypal images of very goddess feminine energy beings. But what I have seen, and maybe this is my experience in the South, but I have seen such a great healing amongst women here that I never could even fathom. And it was through an indigenous grandmother Karina, who comes into transformative festivals and weaves sisters together. And she's a very fierce tantric grandmother that speaks the truth. She resonates it from the heart. And she's going into these festivals with a lot of starseeds. And what I find is a lot of women come together in various age groups, and they share their stories and weave their bundles together. But she came in one time, and the most fierce integration I had about divine feminine from the core of the soul through the soul spark of that essence didn't have anything to do with our personification. And it was more of a resonance, because that's what it is. It's a resonance. That's the divine feminine. And the older that I get, the more that I think about it, and I look at these women, and I start just seeing color, light, and frequency with how people are in their heart. And it was those grandmother medicine women who stirred the home fires and called in community and brought that resonance together. And I feel like it's really important that we don't just look and say, oh, well, they look like they are divine feminine. We become so focused on looks versus the soul essence. And so I'm very grateful that this grandmother came in, and she had us stare at each other's third eye for 30 minutes. And we didn't even know each other. And she says, I want you to see the soul spark of your sisters. And what I noticed is it made women very, very uncomfortable. And let me take you back into the frequency of it. We were in a place about an hour away from here in Oconee County on sacred land, as we were sitting around a medicine drum in sacred circle. And she had women look at each other that personified the glory of the divine feminine in their the way that they represented themselves. And there were women in blue jeans and t-shirts that had broken hearts, broken teeth, trauma in their life, and she made them acknowledge, or not made them, she allowed them the opportunity to acknowledge the divine soul spark within the soul core essence of what that significant spirituality of women is. Because if we saw each other in frequency and vibration, it would be a whole different world to have synesthesia. So, I feel that there's so much wisdom coming in with women that are stepping into the gateway of becoming new paradigm grandmothers and even galactic grandmothers, that we need to open ourselves to the wisdom of these elder teachers to hear the essence of what's coming in through the core of the real divine feminine presence. And the old adage, looks can be deceiving, so it's better to know the core of that essence through that matriarchal energy of the feminine presence. And that's what I embody, because I'm messy, y'all. Sometimes I don't even brush my hair. We don't do that in Asheville all the time. Sometimes I don't care. Sometimes I look like I just walked out of Goddess magazine. It doesn't matter to me, because I realize that soul essence is whatever I take with me. It doesn't matter how I look. It is the core of who that soul essence is as divine feminine to me. And I just had to share that, because to me that's stepping into new paradigm galactic, grandmother. Because we're catty as women. If we just lay it out on the table and we're honest about it, we have to heal this on a collective wavelength. We have to be able to look at each other without fear, without judgment, without, sizing people up, and look at the heart, because the heart is alchemy. And once we get that divine resonance as women, we will be unstoppable. I promise you that.
So to me, the biggest thing with the divine feminine is trust. Do you trust the universe? Or are you going to try to exert your will to make things happen? Or are you going to respond to where doorways are opening? Or are you going to force them to open? I've learned that forcing him to open usually backfires. And I'm going to share a little story with you that's related to this. And to me, this kind of comes along with the growing older and being more reflective and observing. Throughout my life, I've seen a lot of people play with magic, play with spells, play with opening portals. I've seen people die because of this. A lot of people don't know they're playing with fire. They don't understand what they're doing. They open portals, and they don't know what's going to walk through. And I'll tell you a little story. There was an Enochian water elemental that somebody brought into Athens, Georgia. Several women died. They drowned in shallow water. My ex worked with another man there, and they were able to locate this Enochian water elemental and escort it back home. When it got back home, it was welcomed with open arms by its family. Now, I want you to close your eyes for a minute. Imagine you're walking on a beautiful day in a beautiful sunny place, and you have people that you love that are surrounding you. And the person that you love most in the world is next to you, and you're holding their hand, and you're just smiling at each other, and you're having the best day. And all of a sudden, this portal opens in front of you, and something reaches through and yanks your beloved person out of this world, and you never see him again. That's what people do when they invoke elementals or other entities from other dimensions and pull them here. You're kidnapping. It's kidnapping a being and taking them away from where they live and bringing them here, where they're going to be confused and do all sorts of strange behavior because this is not their realm. And to me, when people do that, it's the opposite of the divine feminine. It is saying, I'm going to exert my will. I'm going to do what I want. I'm not going to trust the universe. I'm just going to make this happen. And I've seen so much fallout from this. I mean, I literally have known people that have died because of this. And so it's been really weighing heavy on my heart the past couple days, and I just felt like I needed to share that with people. Because I have, while I've been here, heard people talking about using Ouija boards and people opening portals and are like, oh, it's fine. It's not fine. It's playing with fire. And you might be okay when you walk away from it. That doesn't mean someone else might not die because of something you've opened up and something that doesn't belong in this realm has come through. So I know that's kind of intense, but I feel like it's really important to share with people. It's been really weighing on my heart, so I wanted to share that.
When I think of the divine feminine, I believe that in this realm that we're currently living in, that is the separation of woman and man, but each of us harness both the divine feminine and the masculine within. Balance is the most important, because I had trauma in the back, from my past. I was very too much in my masculine as a protective thing. And when I started my soul journey on healing, I learned that I had to balance both the divine feminine and masculine within me. And how you do that with the feminine is, it's more self-care, more self-nurturing. Sometimes the feminine can also be considered as the dark side, if we want the balance, the yin and yang. So for me, when I started my work with the divine feminine, it all came back to really tapping into the core of who I am. You touched on it, it's the frequency. We are all energy at the end of the day. We're just energy. There's no feminine or masculine until we come down here, but we harness both. And it's finding that balance, and when you find that balance, you can really step into your power and be who you were created to be, if you're male or female. So for me, that's what I think about when we talk about the divine feminine.
Thank you so much. I love hearing all of your answers to all this. So the next thing I want to get into here is, she brought up the dark side of the divine feminine, and, I want to get into the light side of the divine feminine as well, and we kind of mentioned a lot of that here. But to me, when I hear of the dark aspect of the divine feminine, because obviously, as she was saying, there's positive and negatives to, every kind of energy. And for the divine feminine, I really feel that the dark side of it is competition. And you can see that in women everywhere, something that a lot of women have to deal with. Obviously, men deal with it as well. But, it's something that really comes up a lot with women. And, I think it's really interesting, especially in today's society. It's something that really comes up a lot, I've noticed. And, and from my understanding from some research I've done, apparently this was actually a reptilian thing. The reptilians, it was actually the reptilian females that were the ones that the reptilian queens were the ones that kind of started conquering all these different planetary systems and took over everything. So it's kind of interesting. That just goes to show like one path of the dark side of the divine feminine, where that went when they got out of control with their superpowers, which is the divine feminine superpowers, intuition, obviously, and being so far ahead with everything that there's a lot of power in that, and it can get out of balance. So, I just want to know how you guys feel about that aspect of the divine feminine, the competition, and what would you say to young women who, are maybe dealing with this in like groups of girlfriends, and, has it ever come up in your life at any point? Was there ever a point where, like things came up and, with a girlfriend or another woman in your life that you had to work through this with? So I'm just interested to know how you guys feel about that, if there's anything that comes to mind for you.
Oh my gosh, well, yes, well, I can't get into details, but I am going through a divorce right now for various reasons. And I have a very strong core group of like really good girlfriends, and I'm very lucky. My friend Amanda is here. She is one of those girlfriends. That's how I got involved in Camp Disclosure. And there was really I didn't feel like there was a lot of competition between us, with our group of girlfriends. But I have experienced it big time. Especially lately, and especially for all the women that are out there on social media and, starting YouTube channels and Instagrams and Facebooks and all that kind of stuff. There is an element of that, but it's because people are not healed on the inside. And that makes people, when you're not happy with yourself, you're projecting that on everyone around you. And, when you're not standing in your power, when you're just, what's the word? It's like when you're jealous and you've got shame and, and it's just it's not just the way you were raised, but it's the TV shows that we watch, it's just how society is pumping this fear and this need to just, body shame and things like that. That causes people to be unhealed on the inside. And when you have women, that are standing in their power, they could be looked up to, but yet they're ridiculed, And so I think that that's an issue. And I would say to girls today, to love yourself. It's all about loving yourself and healing yourself, and us as parents being role models to those girls and mentors. To show them love and to get them connected to nature, and to just be part of a community, because we're also so isolated right now. And it's that isolation where we're all on our phones, and I'm guilty, we're all guilty of having our head down on our phone and, just not paying attention to the person sitting beside us, and being present in that moment. Instead, we're lost in some kind of matrix reality. When we have human connections right here beside us, we need to reconnect. And I would recommend, just getting our kids and our girls involved in sports. Getting our kids and our girls and boys, of course. I have a boy, but getting our girls involved in just community activities.
I have to say something that's, kind of like tapping me on the shoulder because of Juliet. She brought up something, and I was like, okay, let me access this in a good way. And I've been praying, and I know this isn't the topic, but I have to respond. I think when, and I do agree, because I do a lot of festivals. I have been since 2007, and before that, but transformative festivals. And what I've seen is when we're in containers and people are not aware of what power that we have in unison to be able to bring out dark energies, and this will go into the dark conversation with the women, is it's almost like, okay, well, can we or can't we? It doesn't matter, or should we? I'm a dowser. I'm with the Appalachian chapter of dowsers over a decade. So I always, ask the spiritual realm. I don't play around with fire because I know I'm going to get burned. I have seen people that don't have any idea of what power that we, if we open up that door, then, it can capsize us. I seriously do not resonate with that, because that is just so polar opposite as light beings. And I'm just going to be straight up. I had to say that, sister, because you were like, boom, Om Shanti, boom. You hit it in the core. But personally, I just, knowing all this, and working with frequency, when you call in the directions and the elementals, because the elders always do. And the reason that they call in, and I have to say this, the elemental realm, is you always call in the highest and best, and personally I say in divine consciousness, and sometimes I say the Christ consciousness grid, for the greater good of the whole, for the next 7 generations, because that's where you really focus and hone in on what your intentions are, so they are not self-serving. So I had to say that. Okay, now to the question about the, dark energy with women. Straight up, there's a dark energy with women. Seduction. Let's talk about that one. We use our sexuality to get attention. And, I don't feel resonant with that. It turns my husband off when women try to do that. So there are some brothers that are seriously holding space for the divine feminine, but they don't play in that realm. And so I give a big shout out to the brothers that are holding space for the divine feminine out there in the world. Yes, we need more of those brothers. For real. I mean, the advice I have for young girls, if a guy, and if you have boundaries, you have clear boundaries in the heart, and you want love, and you are monogamous, and you are not polyamorous, and you really want something sensual and loving and connected, then speak your freaking truth. You have to speak from the heart, because if you don't speak from the heart, then you're never going to be authentic with who you are. So always speak your truth, and don't let people play you. Don't let people play games with your heart, because that is your toroidal energy field. And another thing I could say for women, young women, and I wish I would have known this, honor your moon cycles, for real. We have them for a reason. Nurture yourself, care for yourself. Go sit by the sacred water. Go sing to the trees. Go be out in the mountains or nature or wherever you are. Take time to honor yourself, and don't subscribe to the narrative of that you are not good enough. I have a granddaughter. Her name is Ryan. She's my oldest. She's 7 years old. I am going to do a Jedi training camp for girls and boys, but I want to focus on women. I think we need more cool stuff for little girls. I think it's like, I want to teach little girls how to do alchemy. I want to teach girls how to make, I'm going to do a kids Ableton class. You guys probably don't know what that means, but, I want to get kids into frequency and positivity and playing around with frequency and sound and visuals and, really expanding their consciousness and imagination. Especially young girls. I think we're too polarity stated, like, coming from the world of electronic music and growing up in the South and making it around a bunch of DJs that were just like, I was a woman, and I'm not going to get into the dynamics of it, but it was the looking up and down before it was the acknowledging what my skills were. I'm done with that. We don't need that. So I did this whole thing called Sister Circuit Sound. And we need to see each other in the light, not just size somebody up like they're just a object. So we talk about balance, but if we're light workers, then we need to unplug from those dark cord circuits. And I'm just telling you, sisters, like, if I could just speak that to a group of women that, have the world as their oyster right now, I would tell them to set their boundaries, honor their truth, and speak in their heart.
Just to touch back to what you were saying, I don't mean calling in directions. I don't mean calling in the elements. I mean like Enochian elemental beings. Yeah, they're like demonic entities from other realms. That's what I meant. Okay. I don't see anything wrong with calling in the directions at all, or the natural elements of this realm. That's completely different. And I agree with you. Yeah. So we're on the same page. Okay. I'd say my advice would be, start looking at your sisters with like awe, and just drink in their beauty and just appreciate how just amazingly beautiful they are, instead of comparing yourself. It's so easy as women, I think, for us to compare ourselves to each other and go, well, do I just this, it's like, stop. The more you appreciate the beauty of other women, the more you're going to shine, the more you're going to start appreciating your own beauty, And I think that's big key. I wish somebody'd hammer that in my head when I was younger.
I was actually thinking frequency. So when I learned about jealousy, I took it as that feeling telling me that I wanted that's something that resonated with me. So then I had to really get honest with myself. Well, why don't I have that? Then that takes a deeper look inside. So from someone who struggled from a lot of limiting beliefs and self-doubt and low self-worth, I had a hard time looking at myself in the mirror because I was constantly comparing myself. But when I sat back and did a big look at things, there were things that resonated with me on a level. But in all honesty, I wasn't doing anything to like move forward to what I was attracted to. So I think a lot with emotions, people, may look at a negative emotion like jealousy as it being like bad, but flip the script. You can take these lower emotions to really help you out and find that balance to transform your life. With little girls, what I believe is it's the programming, what is said. Most of the reason I had limiting beliefs and self-doubts was because I had parental figures or somebody telling me that, I wasn't pretty or I didn't do that right. I think really introducing little girls and little boys, because that's where it does start. You're right, both divine masculine and feminine, it's that balance that goes back and forth. But teaching them the positive affirmations, or when we do have these emotions that come up to the forefront, not to really look at them as all bad or that there's something wrong with you, but to take a step back and analyze what is it and where is it coming from, and how can you utilize that frequency to help you further your growth. So
thank you all. It was really incredible. Next, I want to get into, I'm sorry, I don't even need this. Next, I want to get into the creative aspect of women, the divine force of creation and sacred sexuality, because, that's something that is very important when it comes to the divine feminine. And as she was saying, sometimes that can be perverse in the wrong way. It's done the right way in the wrong way. And, we're not just talking about like sex in general, but sacred sexuality. A lot of times our culture these days, it wants to pervert it to someone that has a lot of sexual energy, like, oh, they're like, just like a whore or something. Like that's the way nature, like they tend to do in today's society. But really, sexuality is the creative force of nature, the creative force of the divine feminine. And, you know, women are stargates. I love thinking about that. I mean, like, women, their wombs are stargates. They bring in souls. Like, that is so incredible. So I want to get into, you know, just the aspect of the sacred sexuality when it comes to women, maybe related to priestesshoods, if anything like that comes up for you. I know there's a lot of secrets. Maybe some of you don't want to get as much into the secret side of it. But, you know, what is this power of sacred sexuality, and, you know, how would you best describe it, I guess?
Oh my gosh. Well, I wasn't expecting these kind of questions up here today. I'm not sure how to answer that, honestly. You know, I think sex is just sacred, and I personally, I know, like, you just don't share your energy. Your energy is your most precious commodity, and your sexual energy especially is your most precious commodity. And so it is not to be shared with just anyone, okay? And so, yeah, I don't know exactly how to go about this, talking about the sexuality aspect, other than, yeah, it's something sacred. And yeah, I'm gonna pass the microphone.
Yeah, okay. Awesome. All right. I'm pulling the Dreamville Malkivedech card right now. I'm flipping that over, and I'm reading it because I just read about sacred sexuality from a real super dialed in point. We're conduits. We're living alchemy. Every time we plug our circuit in, we are gravitating to every energetic entity, being, every type of realm that person, the DNA, it is the whole realm. You are opening up a vortex. So unless you understand the dynamics of alchemy as a light worker, I'd say, you know, everything is frequency and vibration, like our brother Nikolai Tesla said. And if you understand frequency and vibration, you can unlock the codes to your own universe. Said it. Okay, so sacred sexuality too. I dance, and sometimes, you know, my dance with myself becomes very sensual. Even before I had a partner, I don't even care who's looking at me. That's not why I do it. I dance with trees. I don't care. I just have this connection to the earth that redefined sacred sexuality to me before I even had a partner. And I was very, very definitive about what I wanted in a partnership. I stood on top of the ashram, where Maharishi said the most sacred place on the earth grid in the U.S. was. And honestly, I dropped the bass in the frequency of love. I danced on the mountain. I set up a grid. I called in my balancing alchemical divine masculine partner that could attune my frequency to the right resonance and me, them in conjunction. And I feel that if we, and you know, I'm not going to say I live in Asheville all the time, but, you know, sacred sexuality really needs to be understood that it is a frequency thing. And that's where the ecstasy, the intimacy, the tantra. I lived in an ashram, and these women from India would laugh. They'd said, you guys, your tantra stuff, oh no, come to India. You know, because there is an alchemy with sacred sexuality. And if you go plug your circuits into everything, it's like why people feel so crosswired and glitched out when they hook up. And they're like, I don't even feel like myself. I don't, you know, I've had girlfriends call me like, oh, well, I met him at a venue, or he was a yogi, or blah, 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 you know, and we hooked up, or what, we had a, you know. And then I'm hearing about, you know, and other sides of the fence, because I've worked in the music industry for so long, that, you know, it's sisters of mine who said, girl, I feel like a train wreck. This brother was so fine, and he rocked my world, but now I feel so torn up, I don't even know who I am. So, and I will tell you, I'm an ordained minister, I'm a Shekinah, and so I work with the priestess of, you know, of that energy. And it is a real conduit. If you have a masculine, feminine, divine, feminine, Merkaba couple working with sacred sexuality, you are creating a pile battery. you can take off to the next dimension. It's what you do with that energy. So if you're seriously a light worker and you want to get into that alchemy, I believe that's the stuff that that like fuels the next wave of energy we haven't even tapped in yet. You can manifest with it, trust me. My partner and I do all the time. But it has to be in the core of love, the 528 frequency, to be sacred. That toroidal energy field, that yin-yang, that push-pull, that give and take, that reception and that connection. Otherwise, it's not sacred.
I agree with everything you said. I think another thing, too, that's really important for people to think about is trauma wounds. I've had some friends recently that were friends with someone for 13 years, really good friends, and then they started dating. This guy friend of mine started dating this woman he'd been friends with for like 13 years, and then after like 2 or 3 weeks of dating, they got engaged, and then things started falling apart. And I think the reason for that is when you're in a friendship with somebody, it's very different than when you're in a romantic relationship with somebody. When you jump into a romantic relationship with somebody, then that's when your unhealed mother and father trauma wounds come out. And that can cause all sorts of problems, So in addition to having your approach to sexuality be sacred, also working on healing your trauma wounds so you can show up in relationship in a healthy way sexually and emotionally, and everything is super, super, super important. Because there's nothing else I could add about the sexuality stuff. You covered all of it really well.
I was going to say the same thing. I loved all of y'all's responses. I think there's a big misconception when it comes to the way that sexuality is taught to children and everything like that. It is an energy. It is something sacred. I know me, myself, I've had to do a lot of womb clearing because women, whatever the man is carrying, we can also get attached to us and carry as well, which can also bring our vibration down. And sometimes you may have thoughts and you're like, where did that come from? It may not be your stuff, but because our womb space is so sacred, like you said, cosmic portal, it picks up things. So if, you said it's the divine masculine and feminine relationship when you two are in the same place or working on your stuff, not bringing in your old wounds and traumas to affect the relationship. That's where the transmutation happens in the alchemy. So it's just to be very mindful of your partners. It's a very sacred thing. And I think, with society, that's taken out of. So that's all I got.
Yeah, that was really incredible. The creative force of, Mother Nature and being a woman is just so amazing. And I love the way you all answer that. Sacred sexuality, there's so much power into that, but it's about controlling the power properly and using it wisely. So next I want to get into the aspect of balancing the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Obviously we're getting to a point right now where this is coming up a lot in our modern time. And how do we balance this properly? Also, I think that this can also get into, you've worked a lot with women's societies, and, obviously there's a lot of movements that have been coming out, like, it's not the Me Too movement, maybe it was the Me Too movement, like the whole pussy hat movement, whatever, but, where it's like the feminist movements, that's what I'm looking for, these, like, feminist marches where, it's almost like, they're going too far with things, and doesn't really seem to be about the divine feminine, it's, going somewhere else. And then also just the idea of like modern society, like, it used to be like men took care of women. Men were the ones who were the workers and women were the homemakers. And, that shifted, around the 50s, I think it was. And, now it seems like, women, they work and then they take care of the home, and a lot of times are expected to do everything, and it's almost completely unbalanced in the other direction. So I guess, I think that all plays into the aspect of the balance between the divine masculine and divine feminine. And I think, it was interesting, in my acting class, we were talking about this one day, about the aspect I was just talking about in regards to modern day society. And if you really think about it, a lot has changed in just, like 50 years, just the way women's role in society. And, a lot of the men in the class, even the men in the class, but a lot of the women said, I think everyone's confused about their role now, even the men, So I want to know how you guys feel about this. Like, should it stay this way, or is there a better way to balance this?
Well, this is actually kind of a touchy subject for me because being a feminist, the word has changed meaning to me in a lot of ways. And yes, I've always considered myself a feminist, but there's an agenda right now. And it's very skewed and it's extremely distorted. Okay, and it's because of this agenda that's going on. And it's touchy because, I worked in the field for, most of my adult life. And, I've never spoken publicly about this before. So I'll be very open about this. I think that I'm kind of disappointed in the way the movement has gone, because it's not about raising up women. It's about, it's kind of dirty to me in a way. It's about, it's almost kind of vulgar in a way, with the way that society is pushing this women's movement now. Wearing a vagina, the yoni is it's to be worshipped in many ways. But I feel like there's a vulgarity about the way it's being done in a lot of ways. And it's really not in the best light for women, in this divine feminine role. It's really distorting the divine feminine, in my opinion. So, but it is an agenda, and it is to get us more divided. There's an agenda to divide us all in any way possible, and to make society ugly, and to make women and men and everybody, just everything ugly. And so I think there's, like I said, there's an agenda. So I will pass the microphone.
So I know this panel was called the Galactic Grandmothers, or I always say grandmothers because there's a resonance to that, like I said, and hoping we can delve into that too, because that's where I'm really wanting to bring my ministry work, alchemy to. But that did also trigger something because, straight up, these women's movements recently have been so distorted. And, I just feel like there's a huge agenda with it. I've felt that all along, and I haven't really wanted to speak on that because I don't want any more division amongst our sisters. And I do sacred ceremony with women. And some women are, we're going up to Washington, D.C. with our cat hats and, our yoni hats on, and do you want to come? And I'm like, no, I think I'll just hold space here, And because there is all this, what really dawns on my heart right now, and I'm going to be authentic. I got to speak the truth, or I don't need to be sitting up here. We're all adults. So a friend of mine had a book, and I'm not going to say the word because I'm not going to be vulgar on stage, but it was called Pea Power, and it was a book about the divine feminine, and I read it, and I was like, I'm cold, I need some firewood. That's what I thought of the book, because it was a cold day in Asheville. So, I read it, and it was about using your yoni for controlling men. And I was like, what kind of twisted world are we living in? Seriously. I just don't understand. I mean, and then I have to, I see this book and all these women are, this is a great book, I'm like, I just, I cringe inside. I feel like, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we teaching our daughters? I have a granddaughter. I don't have a daughter. she's my closest I'll ever have to a daughter, except up there. So anyway, what are we teaching our daughters on this earth plane right now? What are we teaching our granddaughters? What are we teaching the next generation? Let's think about it with the ecology. Look at their list. It's already a mile long, this next generation. So we're just going to keep on adding more and more divisiveness, more confusion, more separation. And I just don't understand. I have a lot of sister circles and a lot of friends in Asheville that are polar opposite, and sometimes I get really blown away. And I try not to be in a place of judgment because I know everybody's in their path of how they feel like they need to navigate. But as a grandmother of a beautiful 7-year-old granddaughter, I don't want her to subscribe to this narrative, and I pray she doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. There's a huge agenda, and I think that we teach our daughters and we teach our granddaughters that their power comes from their divine essence, not from fighting, not from battling. That's what this movement's all about. It's a battle. It's fighting, which is completely masculine energy, So it's like, let's go be masculine to be okay with being feminine. It's weird. It's convoluted. And, I think it's okay for women to want equality in the workplace. That's fine. It's okay for couples to have a mixture of energies. Not all women have majorly feminine energy, and not all men have majorly masculine energy. There's this wonderful woman called Carol Tuttle, and she talks about energy types. And you've got type 1s who are a mixture of masculine and feminine energy, and they're very playful and bouncy and happy and the inner child. And you've got 2s who are very sensitive and gentle, and it can be men or women, very, very, very intuitive, very, very sensitive, need to wear soft clothes all the time, and that's the extreme feminine. But, that's like 1/4 of the people that are that. And then you've got type 3s that are masculine energy, walk with a heavy foot and are strong, and, that can be men or women. And then you've got type 4s that are very balanced, and centered, and still, have very still energy. And so 1s and 4s are a mixture of half and half feminine, half and half masculine. So half the people on the planet are equally balanced masculine and feminine, and only 1/4 are strongly masculine, and only 1/4 are strongly feminine. And I hear so many people, and I've got a lot of friends in the dating and relationship niche that are entrepreneurs, and they're so focused on polarity, and women need to just be feminine and men need to just be masculine. And no, we need to be who we are as our true authentic selves. And if you're a type 1 or type 4, then your natural match is going to be another type 1 or 4. And if you're a type 2, your natural match is going to be a type 3, and vice versa. And to try to force people into boxes they don't fit in is making them authentic and not real, and it's ridiculous. And this is one of the things that drives me nuts in the whole polarity discussion I see going on in the dating and relationship world, is trying to force people into boxes they don't fit in. And it's okay for us to be a mixture of the two. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
I've got one more thing to add. I have to. The Merkaba. Okay, that's where I see the balancing alchemy. I'm feminine. I'm masculine. Half the time you catch me in western North Carolina or anywhere in the Appalachian Mountains, I'm walking barefoot. I'm looking at women going, they paid how much to get their toes done? I've never had my toes done. So I don't care about that. And people and women that do, I'm good with that. It's all good. We need to learn how to respect each other more. We need to learn to hear each other's hearts more and just roll with it. Because I guarantee you, if we did not, and I don't watch TV, I don't own one, I don't have one. And there's a reason for that. But, I like to just be in the natural flow of the energy that I feel. And, some people are judgmental. But, what I've seen recently, it might just be because I live in the South, that, there are women that I will say that go through a great deal of extravagance to be able to keep up with other women, and they will do it at an extravagant pocketbook price that they don't even have on their credit card to keep up. When I was growing up, I was an anarchist. I used to skateboard. I made electronic music. I ran away, and that's when I was away, I was before I was 17. And I just didn't understand what this compartmentalization of what people clicks and all that. I never understood all that. And so I just never understood why do we have quasi-acceptable to what is definitive. Why don't we just live our truth and be authentic? And if my hair looks messed up at the Earth Fair, so be it. I don't care, because I just don't put my energy into it, I believe we should take care of our vessels. I believe that we should take care of our bodies, minds, and spirits, and I feel like that should be the definitive essence of the divine, feminine or masculine. And the way I feel like we do that is we work with our own light body essence, and we're present. We take care of ourselves. We eat good food. We breathe clean air. We drink good water. We honor the process, and we don't get caught up in these narratives, because I don't judge women for things like all these things that women feel like they have to do. Like, why do we have to get our nails done? Why do we have to get our hair done? Why do we have to do all this silly stuff? It's to keep up. We have to keep up. What I always said in my women's circle, I'm like, ladies, if it was just women, we would all be eating chocolate. We wouldn't freaking care. Our hair would be messed up. We'd be running around barefoot, probably half naked. And no one would even care. There wouldn't be any stereotyping with the body. I mean, it would just be a different world, but that's not the world I want to live in, because I love my partner very much. I love my son, my grandsons. I love all the men in my life that are wonderful brothers, and I feel like there's a healthiness to it. We got to find the balance. There is a narrative with things. I have to say this too, because it brought up sensitivity. There's an agenda with gender dystopia. There's hormones in the food. There's fluoride in the water. These kids are cross-wired and glitched out. They're not even on the earth. They grow up, and a lot of them don't even know who they are. Their parents aren't even at home, caretaking them, because they have to work jobs. We're all in a system. I think we need to bring our children back to the earth. I think we need to raise them in a clear container. I think we need to raise them on living foods and get them unschooled from the narrative and get them schooled into the earth frequency. PMH Atwater says if you put your children on the earth barefoot, they can be on these devices. I just have so much to say about it. So I'm really passionate about it because I have 3 grandbabies. You're a grandmother, you know it. It's constantly, they're on devices. I like to get them in nature. We go play with fairies. And you know what I'm saying? Grandmother's up in a tree. The grandmother frequency is up in the tree with the kids. I'm like, it is just the way I roll, because their digital generation being, raised in this analog, we're still this analog world. And we're crossing the rift between the 5D and the 5G of consciousness. And I do not want my grandchildren to end up in the 5G consciousness. And I don't want these kids, I see these precious children, they're on devices constantly. I could go off on this all day.
I love what you said about that and what all of y'all said. And you're right, it comes back to the balance. And I think there's a major distortion of what they're putting out there. A lot of people, females and males, that may be confused on who they are. And I'll go back to sticking with the same theme. It all comes back to balancing. And balancing within ourselves. And the way that I was shown from my mentor was that if we think about ourselves as made of star stuff, we have planets out there that are both feminine and masculine. So when I get out of balance, or I may get too much into my masculine, because I tend to do that, I'm workaholic and go kind of person, I check my planets. and I find out where it's associated, like what chakra, and I try to balance that out to bring harmony to both the feminine and the masculine so that I can be centered. And the reason I believe that there is a major distortion with children and people out there, feminists, is because they're not balanced. They're either too much into their feminine, so it's all that, and hate men, and vice versa. So I think it always comes back to us and the frequency that we're putting off, because if we are balanced on a quantum level, it's going to shift the people around us as well to be balanced, because that's what happens. So that's what I feel like when trying to find balance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. This is really incredible. So the next thing I want to get into, and thank you for reminding me earlier, the Galactic grandmothers. What does it mean to be a galactic grandmother? This is the Galactic Grandmother Panel. I kind of forgot about that when we start talking here. So, I'm not really exactly sure what that means, so I'll let you all tell me, but I'm assuming, it has something to do with being the wise woman, maybe like the Holy Spirit, the kind of, maybe like the 0 point, what the universe was before there was this kind of push of masculine energy and the creative force that created the whole universe. So I don't know. I'm going to let you guys tell me, because I'm just not really sure, honestly.
No. Okay. So I get to start, of course. All right. Well, I am not as familiar with the Galactic grandmothers. However, I have had wisdom passed down to me from my grandmothers. And it is very powerful. I am who I am because of my grandmothers. And I have all of their wisdom inside of me. And that is powerful. And I am going to be passing that down to my children. As far as, Galactic, we are all one. We are one with all the galaxies and all the beings in the galaxies and whatnot. So it has to be, to me, it sounds like it's similar to, us as humans. In this life, we are humans, by the way. Okay. It's like us, us having our relationship to our grandmothers, and it's that it's just that wise woman and that wisdom. So
I kind of instigated this panel, yeah, because I talked to Christy, and I wanted to bring some Indigenous grandmothers here, but the elder Indigenous grandmothers want to stay at home. And so, Galactic grandmother to me, when I became a grandmother, like I said, I was freaked out. I had no clue. It was in a rebirth period in my life. I lost a business to a fire, a studio, a healing art space, a collective in downtown Asheville, a $20,000 electronic music studio, thousands of crystals, to a fire. And at the same time, I was becoming a grandmother. And this was during a time where we were producing a transformational fest around Oconee, an hour away. And I had to walk the grief wheel to become a grandmother. And all of a sudden, I'm disconnected from all my creativity. And it's like I'm in the dark night of the soul. And the only thing I leave with is a grid crystal that was centered from 2 points that brought in an 1111 portal as a starseed portal opening. And I'm processing all this, crying with this crystal, with all my broken gear, with nothing, all my sound design burned up in the fire, no music, no way to create. And I leave in tears and just like, what now? What do I do? And I learned I was an escapist. And it freaked me out even more. And, so it was a dark night in my soul as I was becoming a grandmother, because I remember just prior to that, my son called me and he says, Mom, I have some news for you. Are you sitting down? And so when your kid calls you and says that, you're thinking the worst thing ever. And so I hear that and I'm like, just bracing myself. He's like, you're going to be a grandmother. Every emotion that you could imagine hit me all at once. And And I just didn't know how to act. At first I was like, oh my God, how did this happen? And he's like, well, so he's trying to tell me. And, I'm like, you mean I'm going to be a grandmother? So it was just like, it shifted everything in my world, and it was all happening at once. So I had to walk this grief wheel, and Grandmother Karina told me to build a grief wheel as I was becoming a grandmother and to process my whole entire, ancestry and all of this. And I had to collect stones from all over the Appalachian Mountains and lay them in this wheel. And, here I am thinking, I'm going to become a grandmother. What kind of world are these kids inheriting? Oh my gosh, But, my husband reminds me from the higher self, because I know who I am on the higher self level. He says, honey, you came down here in this lifetime. Remember, we had an agreement between the analog and digital bridge. You were going to come through on the analog generation so you could become a grandmother during this time, so you could be ground crew, and so you could do this work and for the next generation coming in. And I was to meet you later on in life. And so when all of that happened, and this was years later when we became partners and we got married and all that. But it was just like, I realized, like I said, I was an analog being and had a digital understanding. And because, when it came to music, that at one time was my life, so I was very fortunate to work with some of the biggest names out there with production and sound. And I literally understood the analog and digital bridge, and what it meant to be a galactic grandmother was, you guys, I've been dancing since I was a baby. I have been around electronic music even in the South my whole life. I had my awakening through electronic music. And the Galactic Grandmother said to me, as I was aware of my higher self, that this is a new paradigm of grandmothers, and it's about getting those codes and downloads to the next generation so they could ground down and dance in the new paradigm with intentional frequencies, and that's how we're going to raise the vibration and awareness and consciousness. And I was to take the medicine bundle from the grandmothers that had transitioned that I have been aligned with. And this stuff came in without me even asking for it. And there's a long story. I'm writing a book about it called Resonate Change. But it had to do with what we are stepping into. My grandparents raised me. I had a very sweet Southern Baptist grandmother right down the road. Actually, her name was Helen. No kidding. I have to share that. No, seriously. She lived in Helen, Georgia. And the ancestral work that's happened here this week for me has put me in a different place. But, and her last name was, her maiden name was Graneman. And then, she was German. So I've had a lot of process this week. But I realized even here this week where I'm stepping into as a new paradigm grandmother of frequency. And I'm not kidding. That's the world I come from and understand. And so, when I was born, I was raised in a house where my grandmother was nurturing to me, but she made me go to church. My grandparents raised me. But on the other side of the fence, I had an uncle who was making analog synthesis with space contemplative microtonal music in the 70s. And I remember the shag green carpet and tweaking knobs on a Moog synthesizer. So I was born into this. And I was in Pampers doing, because that was what I played with. So I have been around sound. I have synesthesia. And so I've seen the frequency changes, and I am very, very passionate about this next generation, getting people on the earth dancing, getting our kids on the earth, getting them near the sacred waters, getting them on the earth so we don't lose our connection to Gaia. It is happening. But, the C virus was kind of a liberator in a sense because it got people close to nature again. Asheville, North Carolina, top destination in the U.S. for travel right now. We got more people coming into our county right now. We can't even house as many people that are coming in. We're in a crisis because it's gotten people back into the earth because all the escapism, has gotten people back on, the earth. And we're in a rift between the 3D, we're living on the 3D and going between the 5D and the 5G. It's happening. This is where I'm stepping in as a grandmother. So my grandmother name came when I was praying, Great Spirit, what is my grandmother name? I was praying one day. I was working on a gathering called Rebirth with Earth in the Pisgah Mountains. And I was praying for guidance. I said, Grandmother, give me some wisdom. And I was talking to my grandmother, and I said, I miss you. I need wisdom. These are very hard times. And this was after I became a grandmother of my first granddaughter, Ryan. And I said, please give me a sign that I'm stepping into the right path. And a lunar moth, landed on the grass right in front of me. And Luna moth followed me right after my grandmother transitioned. And my grandmother was with me for 6 months before she left the plane. And so this Luna moth landed right there. And I got the download. You are a new paradigm, grandmother of frequency. And it was moth, resonator, 3, co-creation. All we are is a frequency. It is all about co-creation. Trinity, coming together in unity at this time. R, like A-R-E. All we are is a frequency. And so that changed the game for me. and I was like, wow, I'm carrying a new paradigm medicine bundle, and I work with the paradigm, so there's like, it just came through. Oh, I'm going to be working with sound alchemy and taking people to our galactic brothers and sisters through sound and frequency and visionary art as a grandmother working with the medicine bundle. And so this whole download came through, and I really just want this next generation to keep their connection with Gaia, because that is essential for our evolution in consciousness. We are not 5G beings. None of us in this room especially. We weren't created to be 5G. Well, so the higher ascension codes, we're in a frequency war right now. So that's the work that I'm doing. And my grandchildren, Ryan, Reagan, and Riley, are freaking awesome. They humble me so much. You just don't know. And it's like you say, you have them and you can instill knowledge and you can spend time with them, but you don't have to be with them all the time, because you can only do so much. You're not the one that's the driving force field of their upbringing. And I've had to learn to let go of those attachments too. And as a grandmother, that's really hard. Why are you giving those children chocolate milk with sugar? What are you doing? Why are you doing this to my grandchildren? So it's really like, it is a new realm of possibilities I'm seeing. And I was told that I was a catalyst for this generation, for raising the vibration and awareness and consciousness. And I want you guys to really pray for me, because I'm seeing it. I'm like feeling this energy that is coming in, and it is here, and we're going to see things that we have never even imagined with, and I believe this, with the younger generation of grandmothers coming in, and I always say they're the techno generation of raving grandmothers. Seriously. Our generation, Generation XY Millennial, is called the Zennial generation. They group us in one little sum. We're the techno generation. So it is an interesting time. We want to keep our connection with the earth. We want to instill that on our grandchildren. And I feel that is the biggest piece for the new paradigm grandmothers. Galactic grandmothers.
I don't really have anything to add about Galactic Grandmothers, but I just share like kind of where I'm at. I'm in a very different place in my life. I had my kids, and then I got into my last long-term relationship that lasted 8.5 years when my kids were still at home. And so then when we split up in 2020, it's like, this is the first time I've lived by myself since I was like 24 years old. And that was only for a few months. So most of my life I've lived with other people. So it was like, it's been a big shift for me, and now I've like put my stuff in storage mid-July, and I'm traveling around, and so I think it's like this, you can kind of have this, I don't want to say second childhood, because it's not like that, but like once your kids are out of the house, it's like, and especially whether you're single or in a relationship, you've got this kind of freedom that you didn't have for many years when you're a grandmother. It has nothing to do with being a galactic grandmother, just a physical plane grandmother.
Galactic grandmother. I will say, I was downstairs thinking about this when you had asked me to come on, and I was like, what do I talk about, galactic grandmothers? And soul fragments came up. We're energy, and it can fragment. and then that can fragment. And so being a galactic grandmother, I got to thinking, I was like, I wonder how many, or if I have any fragments of myself out there. And it goes back to the frequency of looking at things. So I haven't quite gotten to be a grandmother yet. I'm in no hurry. My son's only 16, so we can wait on that. But I will say that I do see and feel that happening in my life, and I am super excited because I love what you said. It's that observation, we're not going to be completely in the middle of it, but we can observe it, and through observation, you learn so much about life. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to experiencing that, so.
Thank you. I feel like this time I want to make it go. Do we mind if we start with you? I feel bad because I was making you answer first, so I'll have you answer last this time. Yeah, I don't know how much more time do we have? I have no idea. I just figured for at least this last one or last few, maybe. We're almost done? 10 minutes. 10 minutes, okay. Okay, so for this one, I guess we'll end it with, obviously you were both saying being a grandmother, you think a lot about the world that you're leaving behind for the future generations. And, I think that's so important, especially right now. I mean, well, the world's always crazy, isn't it? I mean, I think any world era you're in, you're like, the world's crazy, it's ending. Like, everyone's always probably saying this throughout time. But especially right now. But, it's like there's these different forks in the road. We can go down this, like, AI path, and then there's this, positive spiritual path of more spiritual organic evolution. And there's all these different timelines. Who knows where it's going to go. But I guess, maybe with this one we can answer with, like, where would you like it to go? What would you like future generations to know? And where would you like to see this evolve? And, obviously, like, every older generation, they always have to kind of step back and let the younger ones take the reins. And there's always going to be change. There's always going to be evolution. And, maybe it's kind of hard to see that when, you've lived through your life in a certain time, and then these, there's this new energy coming in that the younger people are taking on. So, it's, I guess, what do you see, what do you feel would be most important for this younger generation to keep in mind, and where would you like to see it go in the process of the evolution of this planet? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, whatever. Do you feel comfortable? Okay. What? I meant to have her say.
I don't mind going first.
Okay.
It's fine.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's so interesting as you're asking that question. I'm thinking about, like, how we're all so caught up in getting, like, in such chaos in this world right now that it's hard to think about the future because we're fighting for our present right now in so many ways. And, I just want this world to be more beautiful and more free, okay? And, yesterday I told you after I listened to your presentation, which was amazing, by the way, there was a consciousness shift in myself when I saw the beauty that you were putting out there for our future. Those beautiful buildings with all the plants all around them and everything, because, I've been envisioning our future as being like this prison planet, in a way, and that's not what I want, but that's what is pumped into our consciousness, is this ugly art and this, drab buildings and concrete everywhere, and that's not the future that I want for my child. I want a future like you've envisioned, and now I have more hope now, because now that's in my consciousness. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? For our cities, and so I want a future for our kids that is, I just want freedom. Freedom's the word. That's the word of the weekend, freedom. Freedom and beauty. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that was great.
Exactly. I see it too. I have I've been working on this for my vision boards for years. I see it, regenerative culture, permaculture, sustainable building, coming out of the old paradigm into this whole old school paradigm, this matriarchal system with all the square blocks and all the cities and all that. I see eco-conscious cities. I see more bioremediation. I see remediation technologies. I see, working with the sacred mushrooms, inoculation. I see growing new eco-villages and new intentional communities and, new paradigm visionaries, healing centers. I see quantum tools, quantum hospitals. I've tapped into this consciousness. I've spent time with them up there. I'm like, why am I here at this time? To push it in the South. I am I tick people off when I say environmentalist, I'm sorry. I'm an eco steward. I'm a passionate environmentalist. I used to stand at the front lines of this stuff and get in some trouble. You don't get in as much trouble in Asheville, but you get in trouble. So anyway, I really want us to tap into the consciousness of water and work with the alchemy of water. So I see, sacred water spaces instead of these horrible water towers, having these grid systems built to alchemize the water deep into the core of the earth. And I see new paradigm vehicles. I see my grandchildren being a part of this future. I see us having more food sovereignty, more community. I see us having places that celebrate dance and music and sound alchemy and connecting with the heart of what we all want to manifest and co-create in a positive light that is the taking out of all the systematic things that we plugged into, and even recreating, taking some of those ugly buildings that exist. We're going to have to learn how to remediate. It's not like our society is so freaking replaceable. I do an eco boutique called Reseed, R3S33D. It's an eco boutique because we throw away 16 billion tons of clothing into the landfill annually. I have a theme with it. If I can't offer it to the earth or if I can't burn it, I don't want to wear it. And so I wear a lot of secondhand clothing. I don't want to, just the 16 billion tons of clothing into the landfill annually in this country alone. You think about that. You think about how things are being produced. The plastic stuff, we could build 10 new planets on plastic. Well, how are we going to remediate it? There's technologies for remediation for plastic. I am envisioning, I want to do an event, and there are those events that exist. I encourage you to look into groups like Tribal Alliance, Pushing Through the Pavement. I could go off and off and off on this all day. But it is existing. We just need to amplify it. And my hope and my prayer is Asheville, North Carolina becomes a beacon for it in the Southeast. I also see, forgive me for saying this, I know this is triggering for some people because they think it's agenda-based, but I do see carbon capture. I see, remediating the carbon and really our children inheriting such a brighter future because we have no choice. If we don't change the game, we're done. This planet. We're not going to be able to breathe the air. I don't understand why people in India are, there's a particular, I challenged a particular organization, this largest NGO in the world we were affiliated with, and I wanted to do this Breathe Clean Air campaign because they were meditators, one of the largest meditating groups in the world. If we can't breathe clean air, why do we want to meditate? We have such a situation going on. It needs to be transmuted and transcended and evolved and resolved into love. And I feel like that is the core where we can step, we can go. But it's going to take every one of our participation. Recycling, do you do it? Does it matter? What are you leaving for future generations? That's what I asked Duke Power right down the road when I stood on the behalf of the Sierra Club. The first thing I asked them, let me ask you a question. Do you have any kids? It kind of changed the game. Instead of me going, this is the problem, there's a nuclear power plant down there. Have you thought about what's going to happen? It's being called potentially the next Fukushima in Oconee County. So I'm very impassioned about this, but I don't want to be an environmentalist. I want to be an eco-steward because this is for the next 7 generations. And when you think about that, that blows your mind. If you have kids, that blows your mind. If you have grandchildren, that re-blows your mind. So I see the future, like Buckminster Fuller said, in order for a system to, be obsolete, we just call in the new paradigm. And it's happening on the microcosm. But I'm ready to attend festivals with 3, 4, 5,000 people that are building the village and co-creating conscious community. So we ain't just celebrating and dancing and raising the vibration to the next dimension, but we're creating the village, and we can copy and paste it. That's what I'm seeing.
I love your term eco-steward. That's awesome. Yeah, I agree with you. I've seen so many people get in such a backlash about global warming that they throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it's like, you know what? Forget about global warming. Forget if it's real or not. We have to breathe the air. We have to drink the water. We need to take care of the planet, and that's just logical. That's just something we need to do because it's our home and it's the only planet we have. And so that's really been kind of confusing to me as another divisionist thing. It's like, okay, well, let's don't even think about global warming. Let's just think about taking care of where we live, And I think that's something we need to do to unite ourselves instead of having this divisionist thing of global warming. It's like, let's just take care of the earth. So yeah, I think the biggest concern I have with the next generation is being plugged in. I'm really concerned that a lot of people in younger generations are just going to sign on the dotted line to go down the AI timeline and get plugged in because they're just so plugged in already, with video games all the time. And I mean, I'm addicted to my phone. I'll admit it. I wish I wasn't, but I'm gonna tell you the truth, I am. It's like being out up here, most of the time I haven't had signal and it drives me crazy, It's like, and that's not good. That's something I gotta work on, and I'm even more worried about it. At least I don't play video games, but like my grandson's like, he just wants to play Minecraft all the time, Luckily, he's got a good mom and dad that are like, turn it off, go outside and play, They don't let him play it all the time, but yeah, it's something that's worrisome of kids being so plugged into, maybe we're probably living in a video game on one level, but in this video game, it's important for us to take care of this place, even if it is a simulation, because this is part of what we're doing. And the kids are so plugged into, I guess, an inception level of the video game, that they're not even present in this simulation that we're in. So it's pretty scary.
The kids are very important to me, and I've thought a lot about this on how we can go about helping the children. And for me, I think it all starts with our healing, because the reason that we are the way we are is because of our upbringing. So if we can take a step back and stop teaching the things over and over and over that were taught to us that were not right, i.e. video games. Video games became the electronic babysitter because we were either latchkey kids or left to be raised by ourselves. Well, let's take it back to us. Why do we do that? Why are we avoiding that? It goes back to our healing, because the kids are really just learning from us by watching, by listening, by hearing. What are we programming with them? So I've thought really long and hard about this. How do we change the planet? How do we go to the next evolution? It is the children. We're coming in to make a change. We're awakening people, we're healing, but we also have to remember that, outside of just like healing others, if you are a healer or whatever it is you do, you still have to do it for you inside, especially when you have kids, so that you're not repeating or reprogramming. We have to deprogram ourselves before we start programming our kids. And that, for me, is the core of how we can really make a change, is by us starting by doing our own healing. And it goes back to the whole balancing of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. Because I believe in that center is where you are connected with your higher self and to source. So it's the programming, it's the environment we live in, it's all distorted, and it's just kind of like taking a step back and not repeating those same behaviors.
I agree. Can we just take a moment to give all these amazing women a round of applause? Wow, that was incredible. So just to wrap this up here, I want you all to really think about this last question I asked. What world do you want to leave behind for the future generations? You may not be a grandmother or even a mother, or a father or grandfather, but, really think about that, because, we're the ones that have to pass on the torch for these next generations, and these kids that are, growing up right now are going to be the future, and what world are we leaving behind for them? And, I think it takes all of us coming together to co-create and take the power into our own hands. A lot of people at these kind of conferences, people like to talk about the elites, how they control everything, and it's all about they and these people. But, it's not about that. It's about all of us stepping into our power and really co-creating a new world together, a better world together. So really think about how you would answer that question. Because I think, just your thoughts, even if you aren't physically doing anything, your thoughts on that are being sent out into the collective. And I think that's really important. So thank you all for being here. And I guess I'll pass on the mic for the next talk.